Hi there, this is Cece Zach, and if you've worked your entire life, reached this chapter, which I call the third, and found yourself wondering, now what? Well, you are not alone. Because retirement isn't just about what you're leaving, it's about figuring out who you are now and what you want next. This is the Meaningful Retirement Podcast, where we turn uncertainty into clarity and help you create a life filled with joy, fulfillment, and freedom. So let's get into it. Episode of Meaningful Retirement, I am joined by Rich Wartel, a seasoned healthcare entrepreneur and former CEO and founder who built and successfully exited his company, bringing decades of experience in strategy, growth, and guiding organizations through complex transformation. What makes Rich such a powerful guest for me on this podcast is how I've observed him over the years to be so willing to redefine himself after that extraordinary success that he had at a very young age, and leaning into the challenging and rewarding work of reshaping his identity on his own terms. He will offer a deep, honest perspective on transformation, purpose, and what it truly means to evolve into your next chapter. So with that, I want to welcome Rich. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, Cece. I appreciate the invite.
Well, Rich, the one thing I just wanted you to know, and I think this is only the second time that I have brought my dog on here. I don't think you have ever met my dog, Rudy, but he has been part of the transformation I have made in my life through the years. But hello, Rudy. Hey, Rudy, I want you to say hi to Rich.
Hello, Rudy.
Woof, woof. Yeah, that's about it.
So cute.
He's
so
a good
cute.
boy. Yeah, he's helped me through all of this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Dogs are better than people.
Well, and that leads me to a quick question before we get into the nuts and bolts of this. You have even named your company after your two dogs. What do the animals mean to you in your life and your purpose and your family?
Yeah, they're a big part of it. I mean, I think I've told other people that I truly believe that dogs are people's ways of experiencing unconditional love. I mean, I'm not sure if you get that from your kids or your spouses or anything else, but a dog is always happy to see you when you come home. A dog is always loving to you. And I think there's just a freedom with it too, that just as a man, like you can express much more emotion with a dog than other people sometimes. So when we started the first company, Two Labs, my wife had a yellow Labrador Retriever and I had a black Labrador Retriever, and couldn't think of a name for the company as I was still working for Cardinal. So we decided to call it Two Labs. And to this day, everybody still thinks the company's named after two laboratories as opposed to Labrador Retrievers.
Oh, that's so funny. That's right. And for you listeners out there that may not know Rich's background, he, like I, was in the healthcare industry. And so that's where the two laboratories come from.
Yep. Yeah, but still a big part of our lives.
But Rich, you just mentioned unconditional love. And I just find that an extraordinary thing for you to just immediately say about something that you're seeking in life. And so before we jump into retirement and me-tirement, tell me a little bit about unconditional love for yourself as you enter into this third phase of life. What does it mean to you for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it means forgiving yourself for any missteps along the way and acknowledging that we're not perfect. I think loving yourself is a really important part of life. And I think that, I don't know, there's a rationalization that I think I make that no single event is really life-defining in that. I just think that we've got 80 years on this planet. And there's
come
not
on, Rich.
much
You
I can
got
say.
100 years. You and I have been
My
talking
gosh, I
about
hope
this
so.
for a while.
I hope so. But I don't think that there is a single events out there. So tragically, I had a friend reach out to me about their friend's daughter committing suicide a couple of weeks ago, and I was thought,
Oh,
I just, it is so hard for me, Cece, having a 20-year-old and 18-year-old and a 16-year-old to hear about this because it wrings my heart out. I just want to tell all these kids that you have 80 or 100 years more to your life on here. How can you take one little event like not getting into the college you wanted to
Yeah.
get into, or a boyfriend or girlfriend breaking up with you, or not getting the internship or job that you wanted, and make that the finality when you've got this unbelievable long time in front of you with so many great things. It's really hard to reconcile. And I think part of it does trace back to unconditional love of yourself and having that for people too. Is like, I don't know. I think if you love yourself enough and you love your family enough, you would never even consider something like that because of the impact it has on others too. So I don't know.
Yeah, we're kind of jumping off into a whole nother realm than where I thought we'd go, but
As usual.
yes, this is true. And for you listeners out there too, Rich and I go back about 10 years through our alma mater, Skidmore College. And we've had such great in-depth conversations about, life and happiness. But back to the unconditional love. It is something that I have found in the research that I've done that people give themselves permission as a way to start to find that unconditional love. They give themselves permission to say, okay, I'm going to change a belief I have or a story I have told myself. And I wonder where your thoughts are on this unconditional love as it relates to you going into this phase of life.
Yeah, it's such a different phase of life. I think that, truthfully, I didn't have a ton of time to think about myself when I was starting companies and running them and everything else. So I don't think you give yourself the same grace during that period. You're just accelerating. You're just
That's right.
going, going, and going. And then
Until
all
your
of a
body
sudden,
drops.
yes, either you burn out or
Right.
you have to reset, or in my case, we sold the company. And then I had to take a look at really who I was, my identity, my purpose, the meaning that I could find in life. And that has been the big search in this third of my life for the past 6 years. Um, and I think it's, again, it ties back to self-love. I mean, once you start becoming more introspective and analyzing these different pieces, it really forces you to reconsider some of your opinions and some of your direction in life, but it also opens up some truly wonderful opportunities to grow. And I still believe very strongly that if you don't grow, you die. That's why I've always thought that retirement was an antiquated notion. I just I just think that once you stop having purpose and once you stop growing as an individual and with your family, then I don't know. I think your body just stops working if your brain stops working. So
I couldn't agree with you more. This is obviously a subject that you and I see very similarly. But let me start with how old were you when you sold the company?
50. So it was just before actually the first time that I sold the company, it was 2016. So I was 40, 46, 47 years old. And then we sold again in 2020. So at that point, I was 51.
And I know you very well that you had a well thought out transition plan in all of this. And at 47, when you were looking to keep running the company, you obviously you sold it again. Tell me a little bit about how your transition plan to what you thought you may be doing at 47 and beyond is different than what it is today. And how have you managed your self-love throughout all this?
I think it's a good observation, Cece, because I do see some market differences between when I was 47 and sold, and then continued to work for private equity for 3 years. Then stopped in 2020. I stopped working for private equity, and that was a transition. And then now, 6 years later, I think I've learned even more. I will say that when we sold the first time, I wasn't expecting to necessarily have to continue to stay at that pace for so long because for 3 years working for private equity, it was like burnout instantly. You were running as fast as you can, growing the company. We grew from 30 people to 175 people in 3 years
Wow. Yeah.
through acquisition
That's
and organic growth. So it was very much all about work. So when I'd had this windfall, obviously we got money and things like that too, but it became somewhat irrelevant because I didn't have any time to really enjoy it. I mean, I'd buy a material thing here and there, but that wasn't really the true enjoyment of the financial security that I had because I was busy working 60, 70 hours a week. And then
wow.
when I stepped down in 2020, and we sold the company out there, it was very different because I stepped down right before COVID, literally 3 weeks before. And then COVID hits, and I am literally doing nothing. I'm
Wow.
not working. I'm in the house with my wife and the kids and the dogs for the first time in forever and not traveling. I used to travel 50% of the time, and then I'm in the house during COVID that whole entire time. And the planning for that and the reaction for the future was just so different. I really thought that I was going to go into that. And I remember going home and telling my wife, I was like, hey, I've stepped down and now I can help you with everything, help you with the kids and help you with all this stuff. And my wife looked at me like I was crazy because she said, she's like, what the hell? She's like, I've been doing this for 13 years already. What are you going to do? So I
You're
learned.
just going to muck it up, is what you're going to
It's
do.
exactly. I learned very quickly that there's different worlds between husbands and wives. And I had left my corporate world and was literally trying to infiltrate her world um, with good intentions of helping her,
Right.
but she already had her systems and processes and everything she did. So that took a little getting used to and adapting to, surely for her, but for me also, because in my heart, I love to help people. And
Yes, you do.
the, the fact of the matter is, she didn't need my help. She was already doing that job for 13 years, but I thought somehow I was going to come in there and save her from everything else, and that was a new learning. So I think at that point, when you aren't necessarily focused as much on all the other people in your life, because I've always been that kind of helper and that kind of person out there and stuff, and you start to focus on your wants and your needs and what you want out of life, it is eye-opening because you don't usually take a lot of time to do that when either you're sprinting through corporate America and trying to work as hard as you can to get to an endpoint, or when you are now presented with every option in the world out there.
All right.
It's
So,
overwhelming.
Rich, let me interrupt for a second because what
Sure.
I have missed is I know you had a transition plan, but COVID hit. What did you see yourself doing before COVID hit that made everything come to a standstill? And now all of a sudden, you
Yeah.
want to be that helper at home, and everyone's saying, go find another place or to help. We're doing just fine right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Listen, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. So the second that I stepped down, I was ready to start another company. I already had an idea. Knew what I wanted to do, and I was ready to go out and start raising money and hiring people to do something different from two labs. But then COVID hit, and I looked around, and I, pardon my language, but it was a total shit show. And I basically looked at it and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to start a company in this environment when we had no idea what was going on. And as we progressed further into it, 6 months, 8 months, with the kids at home and going through the summer, I was spending more time with my family than I had in probably the previous 5 years. And I lost some of the motivation to go out there back into the business world and start another company. I wanted to spend more time with my family because I really enjoyed it, especially the kids. I had never been able to spend that much time. That summer of COVID, I know this sounds awful, but COVID was great for us. I can't think of too many times that were better as a family. Over that summer, we would hit 7 lake houses for 7 weeks and got to
Wow.
spend all that time. Yeah, we got to spend all that time with the kids. And I had never been able to do that before. I would, take a week of vacation here or maybe 2 weeks there, but not to be able to spend all that time with it and not having work hanging over your head, it was extraordinary. And the plan just changed.
So, knowing that the plan changed, were there any stories or beliefs that Rich had to change about himself to let go of the past in order to be present with his family?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's still something that I work on 6 years later. I think men particularly tie identity so closely to work that if they're not working all the time, if they're not achieving and stepping up in the corporate ladder, then who are we? And one of the things I discovered by spending more time with my family in COVID too is that I could have multiple roles. I didn't have to be
Oh, that's
a
awesome.
one dimensional type of person on there. Now, I will tell you, 6 years later, I can learn that that's actually the part of my life that's easiest. And back then, I thought it was the hardest.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think hasn't changed. And um, it's not that I get the most fulfillment out of work. I get a lot of fulfillment out of my family, but it just comes naturally. And I think there's a lot of people out there that, even during the struggling times with work, it's still somewhat of a natural instinct on something that, well, you have to be very present and you have to work on all the other parts of, being a spouse and being a father and doing all that stuff. It's much more difficult than just going to work and doing the things that I've done for 25 years.
So, let's go back to work. Okay. Fast forward 6 years later, and the company that you had mentioned that you wanted to start, my assumption is that it did not really kind of take off, and for whatever reasons, COVID probably being 99.9% of it. Um, where is Rich today, knowing these new epiphanies about himself? Where is he today as it relates to his professional slash, and I'm going to say part of your purpose? You have
Yeah.
multiple different purposes in life, but tell us where you are today and how is life for you today?
Yeah, life is good. I mean, it's an evolving growth process, I would say. So eventually, I did try to start another company about a year and a half after COVID, or so. I started a company in the medical cannabis industry, trying to get third-party reimbursement for medical cannabis. And a couple things I discovered there. One is starting a company at 53 years old is much different than starting a company at 33 years old. So takes a lot more energy out of you, and it was a lot harder to really be able to work those kind of hours and generate that kind of energy. The second part of that was because I technically didn't have to work. That was also a little bit of a demotivator. Also, I had enough money in the bank where I could have retired when I was 33 years old. I had to make a living and support a family, so that makes you a probably a better entrepreneur because you work harder. You have to
Yep.
survive. You have to
You're
thrive.
scrappier too back then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So tried doing that for about a year, and then eventually we shelved it because of some legislative challenges that still haven't gone through 4 years later. But after doing that, one of the things I realized is that I could still get fulfillment within the business environment through a variety of ways. And really, for the past 6 years, one of the things I've really enjoyed is I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I work with private equity, I work with pharma manufacturers, I coach people, I coach executives, I do all kinds of things out there, and I get a little flavor for lots of different things. But it's still, you know, it's still adrenaline that I get out of all these things too. Whenever I'm out there working in this variety, and you know instead of starting whole companies now, I help companies start new products or new divisions and things. So it's not my capital at risk. It's not 50 hours a week, but I can actually work with existing companies and their teams in order to cultivate and execute on new ideas. So I still have the ability to be an entrepreneur, but it's what I call adjunctive entrepreneurship
Yeah.
rather than
I love
taking on
that.
the whole thing myself. So it's been very fulfilling. And having just come back from a conference in Las Vegas for specialty pharmacy and pharmaceutical manufacturers, it's great. There's tons of opportunities out there, and the hardest part really is limiting my work schedule. I really don't want to work more than 25 hours a week so I can continue to spend as much time as I can with my wife and my kids.
That is just extraordinary. And what you have articulated is that you have made a shift in your professional fulfillment. And I love, and you're also so great at this, is creating a term for something that is not used in mainstream, but will be soon. And that's adjunctive entrepreneurship. Because one of the things that I love, and I'd love for you to comment, I love about you personally, is that your ego has always been checked at the door. At least my perception is. And the fact that you find just as much fulfillment of being that adjunct entrepreneur as opposed to being the big cheese. I wish that we could spread that belief, that thought that you could maybe even get more out of what it is you're striving for professionally if you just look at your skills and competencies and how you want to make an impact, regardless of title, especially as we get older, because I find so many people are working so hard, trying to get on boards, just continuing to maintain that identity. And so I guess the net of what I'm trying to say is that it's extraordinary that you have pivoted in this transition in such a humble yet extraordinary way to give back. So tell me a little bit about, the fulfillment, and, you talked about the freedom, but tell me a little bit about the joy and the fulfillment that you're getting out of this new role you've created for yourself.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate the compliment. I'm not sure I align 100% with it because I do think that there's a certainly a surge in dopamine when you get that type of ego confirmation out there. For example, when I was out in Vegas and stuff, that there was people that recognized me as the founder of Two Labs, and I hadn't run into that quite often right now, and it felt really good and everything else. But I guess I've grown up a little bit where I can internalize that as opposed to externalize that, and that it's not necessarily the number one thing that drives me right now. It helping others drives me even more. I get more satisfaction after at taking one of my mentorees and having them succeed. I've got one in particular now that's starting his second company, and
Wow.
his first company changed his life. I mean, before that, he was making like 40 grand a year, and him and his wife were just having challenges supporting the family. Now, he's doing 13 to 15 grand a month in his company, and he's got enough. He's got enough working capital to essentially start a second idea that he has, and that's great to coach him on that and see his success in all of this. And I really enjoy that. I mean, I think I've always had that in me. I've never need to necessarily be in the spotlight and claim that. But the bottom line of it is that I found my purpose in helping others, and that's still something that generates more joy for me than myself. I think it's even gotten more so in that being now in this third. I don't feel as much pressure to achieve as I used to. Like I really felt it hard when I was in my 40s to be able to go strive and do that. But I think once you get over that hurdle, once you have your first success like that, it gets easier. And then you become more generous to other people with your time and with your money and everything else. So I think that's been a big change over the past 6 years.
I believe you've read the book From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks, because we've talked
Absolutely.
about it.
Love it.
And what you have just articulated is what he has found in all of the research that he's done is that, well, two things that you mentioned is one is you're not getting fulfillment from external factors anymore, which I just think is, amazing. You said the word I internalize things that you get your satisfaction through what you're doing for others, helping others, and it's joyous for you, which is fantastic. And the other thing that Arthur says in From Strength to Strength is about how our mind shifts, the cognitive ability of our mind shifting from being fluid intellect, being afluid, where when you were that entrepreneur and you were going at Mach 5 and you were working 80 hours a week, your mind was very fluid and you were problem solving 24/7, as opposed to the shift that you have just mentioned, and very similar also to the guy that started Modern Elder Academy, Chip Connolly, where you have become a mentor in respects, and you're using your wisdom. You're crystallizing your wisdom to help others and those others may even achieve more than you have. What comments do you have about you
Yeah.
being the role model for Arthur Brooks?
Yeah, well, I think you actually bought me that book. I think you actually shipped it to my house and everything, and it's still something I cite all the time, the difference between fluid intellect and crystallized intellect. And I believe it very strongly, and it has lots of levels to it also, Cece. I think that as you get older, obviously your capacity to remember is not as good, and I'm not in the day to day on it, so I can still recite facts and figures and everything else, but it really is the experiences that connect with people more often than not, on so many different levels. One is that wisdom that you have, that experience that you have. I tell people all the time that I'm just teaching them from the mistakes that I made, not from the successes that I had. I had a great meeting with the guy that was the president of a specialty pharmacy when I was in Assembia, and the connection was so strong because it wasn't about telling him about my capabilities and my traits and what things I knew, but I really told him about my experiences. And here was a guy that was in his 40s running a $300 million company that obviously was overwhelmed, like wasn't sure about what his next step strategically was for his company, and personally and professionally was probably not very confident in what he could do on his own. But the connection that was generated there was because I could tell him I went through the same thing, that I experienced a lot of the same things that he did, and that I made some mistakes and I made some good decisions there, and I learned a lot of wisdom from that. And that truthfully is exactly what Arthur Brooks was talking about with strength to strength, is that that wisdom is worth more. On another level, I've totally gotten into AI a tremendous amount. I love using Gemini and ChatGPT. I'm vibe coding. I'm doing all these things
Of
out there and
course you
stuff.
are. Of course you are.
Well, it's learning and stuff. But one of the
Wait a
things that
minute,
I've
what is
realized,
vibe coding?
that's where you can create your own websites or apps through using software like Lovable or Zeit. It's really intuitive. Like you've got a panel on the left-hand side,
All
and
right, we're not
you
going to
can
get
literally
into it.
tell
It's way over my head, but I'm going
it.
to offer to have you come back on because I think
Sure.
AI is a huge opportunity for you to help educate people about the advancement. It could help us in our third.
So
Um,
here's how it supports, though, Arthur Brooks' thesis of fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence, though. Fluid intelligence has become more commoditized, right? At the end of the day, you
yeah,
can go onto
so
Gemini
true.
and
Yep.
ask it anything, research it anything, get any facts and everything else. But the application of experience, crystallized type of intelligence, wisdom, experience, and stuff, that it can't be translated into an AI bot or an agent or something that's going to tell you how you succeeded or failed from your own experiences on there. And I think that's where there's going to be a tremendous stratification of value from employees, from people out there, is those that have wisdom, those that have experiences are going to elevate. And those that can only research and cite facts and follow programs and parameters and stuff, they're going to get supplanted
Yeah.
by artificial intelligence because you can duplicate that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And thank you for suggesting, the difference between the fluid and crystallized and how AI is going to impact that. But I am going to have you back on because I know
Sure.
how in tune you are with AI, and I think that there's something that you can help our learners, our listeners, learn from.
Sure.
The one last topic is that I know that you've had your own personal physical life quake. You and I have talked about as we get older, some parts of our body just don't work the way that they used to. But what I would want you to just kind of end with is what are the lessons that you've learned about taking care of your physical vessel, your body? And is there anything you would have done differently in those years that you were working 60, 80 hours a week?
Gosh, it's a good question. For me, the life-changing event actually occurred while I was still working. I was just turned 50 and I got diagnosed with a myocardial bridge. My heart, the arteries were constrained or squeezed from the muscles. So all of a sudden, I'm on 3 or 4 different medications trying to slow down my heart. I couldn't push myself anymore from a running and biking standpoint the way that I could. And it was my first brush, Cece, with looking at that there's an end to this. Like really, I really thought I was somewhat invincible up until that point, and coming to terms with the idea that there's going to be a fixed amount of time that you're on this earth is a difficult thing. And I think there's a lot of ways to react to it. Go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think what I have loved is watching you transform into an identity that really appreciates your physical vessel at such a young age. And it's really important for all of us to recognize that we're only on this planet once and this body is only here. So please continue with,
Yeah.
thoughts and learnings and what you would like listeners to do with their body at this stage of life.
Well, I mean, I think I had to adjust a little bit because I loved exercise for stress relief back then, and I still like it for that too. But a lot of it comes down to the desire for longevity. And I've changed a lot of things there. I don't run very often right now, but I bike more frequently. I play pickleball more frequently, which isn't the best thing for your body, but
So you've
it's still
shifted your activities.
absolutely. I
Okay.
had to. I mean, my body, even when I play pickleball, CC, for 2 hours on a Sunday, my body feels it a lot. But as I'm playing, I'm not pushing myself like I used to on there. I still enjoy it. It's still competitive, and that's an important part of it too. Um, but it's also a great social connection with the people around it, which is also an important part, I think, there too. Um, my goals by eating differently, and listen, I still have my vices. I still like my diet soda and my chocolate and everything else, but it's in moderation. And I actually changed my diet quite a bit from a protein to carbohydrates, which I'm very low on carbohydrates and high on protein, and it helps me maintain my weight effectively, and helps me build muscle. Lifting weights, I lift weights 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. So I think it is important. It's sound body, sound mind. I feel so much better after I work out in the morning than when I don't, and I feel so much sharper when I do that too. So I think it's a really important part of it too. And here's the thing that many people may not agree with too, but I really believe that these GLP-1s, if you need those to regulate your weight, use them. There's more and more studies that are coming back about not only it helping for weight management, but also regulating your insulin resistance so that the chances of Alzheimer's and dementia are less when you take a GLP-1. So I'm not on one now, but I'm actually considering microdosing one just so that I can prevent insulin resistance and Alzheimer's, because that's like my biggest fear is that, later in life, I'm going to not be as sharp as I am right now.
Well, I know I'm definitely not as sharp as I was even just 5 years ago. But thank you for mentioning that because I think that's a whole nother topic is people, I believe, think that it's failure if you use a GLP-1. And I look at that as, listen, it's one of the tools that are in the toolbox. So thank you for mentioning that. And, the last thing as we close up this podcast is, what suggestions or thoughts do you have for, I'm going to say, entrepreneurs that are out
Yeah.
there that are looking to shift into this me-tirement phase of life? What is it that maybe you would have done differently, or what did you do that you would highly recommend to others as they look to transition from being a CEO of a very large, fast-growing company?
Yeah, I listen, I coach a whole bunch of different people out there. I've got 18-year-olds, I've got physicians, I've got CEOs and entrepreneurs. And I think the commonality between all of them when they're entering that third is to start early. Start planning
Yeah.
it out well before. Like I coached them, I use some PowerPoint tools and things like that, but you got to start thinking about what your life could look like after you decide to retire. You can't do it when they basically hand you a pink slip or when you decide that you're going to step down, or when your company gets sold, because you're ill prepared. I think we spend so much time preparing financially, and we hire financial analysts, we hire, accountants and lawyers to plan our estates and everything else. That's the easy part. I mean, really figuring out what life is going to be after that is hard. And it involves not only yourself, but your spouse and your kids and other people too, in order to make it right. And I know you're doing a bunch of coaching out there, and I'm a firm believer of that, is that you don't take this on yourself. My sister's a child psychologist, and I utilized her as a resource for all this stuff. I utilized you as a resource. You talk to psychologists, you talk to whoever you need to, but get out ahead of it. Start really thinking and planning this, so that when that event happens, you're not wandering around for months trying to figure out what you're going to do next or how you're going to live your life differently.
Rich, I couldn't have closed this episode out with a better suggestion, because it's all of the research that I have. If there was one thing that anyone could have done differently, was just start planning earlier, when they were in their second third, when they were in their 40s, truly understanding what their authentic being needs to be in the third for them to be joyous. And so for all of you out there that are listening, it doesn't matter what age you are. It needs to be consciously created, and we need to plan to do that, because financial planning is just one piece of it. So,
Absolutely.
For all of you out there, transitions from your second third to your third are hard. And letting go of who you were to figure out who you are now is a big shift. And Rich, your vulnerability and transparency just shone through in this episode. So I'm so grateful for that. And if you listeners out there are feeling uncertain or a little lost, you're not alone. But this is where something new begins, because when you understand who you really are, you create a life of real joy, fulfillment, and freedom. And the key in all this, as Rich said earlier, is you don't have to do it alone. So for those of you out there, please reach out to me on my website, www.ccizak.com. And till next time, y'all, keep creating a life that feels meaningful to you. And Rich, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And Rudy says thank you too.
Thank you, Cece. My pleasure.
Talk soon.
Look forward to it.